right, this is lesson 2 in the percents unit of Math 8. We are looking at percent of a number today, and we're going to start with mental math because it is important to be able to calculate percentages on the fly, especially when they're like with easy numbers like 10%, 1%, 50%, that kind of thing. And then we'll get into the calculations where we'd want to use a calculator in a minute. Okay, so let's talk about some benchmarks ones, the ones that you should be able to do in your head. So let's talk about 25% and 50% of a number first. I'm going to use 80 just as an example. We'll start with 50% of 80. People should know 50% means, that's probably the one you're most familiar with, means half. So all we want to do is divide by 2, or cut 80 in half. So 50% of 80 would be 40. 25% of a number is a quarter of a number, so it means divide by 4. So for 80, 25% of 80 is a quarter of 80, or divide it by 4, you get 20. Okay. 10% and 1%, there's a nice little trick for these. So 10% of a number is like 1/10 of that number. We divide it by 10. We can move the decimal place. 1 spot to the left. Okay, so 80 divided by 10 is 8. So you just move the decimal place over 1 and you've got 10% of your number. If you want to do 1% of your number, we divide it by 100. Because remember, 1% means 1 out of 100, so 100th. So you move the decimal place 2 spots left. So here for 80, we'd move it twice, it'd become 0.8. And that's it. So those are kind of the benchmark ones. If we wanted to do a more complicated one like 30%, let me show you how you would do that. We would just use the benchmarks that we already know. So one way to think about 30% is 3 times 10%. So if I'm going to do 30% of 400, first I'd start by just thinking of like, okay, what's 10% of 400? So 10% of 400, that means we just divide it by 10, so we get 40. So 30% of 400 is just going to be 3 times 40. So 120. There you go. So like if you saw in a store, there was like, I don't know, a laptop and it was 30% off, you could do this little calculation and be like, oh, okay, it's $120 off of the price. Or if you needed to, like if you were going to give a 30% tip, for example, on something that was $400, you would be giving a $120 tip. All right. Another way to do it, there's more than one way sometimes. You can think of 30% as, 25% plus 5%. So 25% of 400, that means we divide it by 4, so it would be 100. And 5% of 400 is half of what 10% is. So we already know 10% is 40, so it would be $20, half of that. And if we add those together, we get 120. Oh, I don't know why I'm doing dollars, but we can erase those dollar signs. There we go. I was just thinking in my example there. So same answer as we got on the right, just 2 different methods from doing so. I'm going to put half of 10% in brackets there so you know. Okay, let's talk about how to do percent of a number with a calculator, because sometimes the numbers will have decimal places and it will be just too tedious to do it by hand. So another way to do a percent of a number is to change it to a decimal and multiply. In the fractions chapter, we talked about how the word of means multiply in math, especially when it comes right after like a percentage or a fraction. So when we're talking about like 30% of 400, really the of it means multiply. And 30% is the same thing as 0.3. And so we're going to do 0.3 times 400, which is 120. So same answer again, just another way to do it. And this method is really good if you have a more complicated number or a more complicated percentage and you don't have time to like do all the mental math and you have a calculator handy. Okay, so let's do some examples where we would use a calculator. Okay, so these are all sort of common examples that you might see in your real life. So it says a survey was done at school with 100 or 1,500 students, and it showed that 13.6% of those students were involved in school sports. How many students are involved? So we're going to do 13.6% of 1,500. So this one I'm not going to do using mental math. I'm going to use my new strategy, which is change it to a decimal, which means divide by 100, or move the decimal place twice. So it's going to become 0.136. Of means multiply, and 1,500. So let's type that into your calculator. I've done that already. When I multiply those two numbers, I get 204. So 204 students were involved in the school sports. Okay, let's do one more. A sales associate at a shoe store makes 3.5% commission on every sale they help with. So that means they get like a little bit of the cut of what they sell. A lot of stores work like this. And so if they sell a pair of shoes for $148.79, how much commission will they earn? So they're going to earn 3.5% of whatever they sell. So 3.5% of $148.79. Okay. And so we're going to change this to a decimal number. So it's going to be 0.035. Move that decimal place over 2 positions. Of means multiply. And then we're going to put the price. Type that into a calculator. And we round to 2 decimal places. And it's $5.21. So the associate earned. So that's why you have to be careful if you go to a store where the sales people make commission, just because they might be trying to sell you the more expensive shoes or whatever you're buying, so that they can make a little bit more commission. All right. C, the volume of ice is about 110% of the volume of liquid water. If you've ever tried to freeze a water bottle, you would know this. Sometimes if you freeze a water bottle that's like pretty full, it's going to explode in the freezer. That's because ice actually expands when it freezes. So it's about 110% of the volume that it is when it's in liquid form. So it asks, what is the volume of ice created when a 500 milliliter water bottle is frozen? So we're going to do 110% of 500 milliliters. So we're going to change this to a decimal. So divided by 100, it'll be 1.1 times 500. This one you could do using mental math because it's not too bad, but we'll do with a calculator. It's 550 milliliters. And so the frozen volume is 550 mils. So that's why if you ever freeze a water bottle, you want to leave a little bit of room in the top just so your water bottle doesn't break or explode when you freeze it. Okay, and that's the end of the percent of a number lesson.